Welcome to the West Ham Voice. Thank you for joining me on this bank holiday weekend, Easter weekend. I hope you're all having a decent Easter. Of course, the only thing that could possibly spoil a long weekend is the football. And so it did, of course. Plenty of things to sort of mull over from the game against Southampton. I'm sure you probably already watched the post match review that I did with Wiggy as we were coming out of the stadium. They were immediate thoughts, but a lot has happened since then, of course, because we've had the Niclas Fullkrug interview, and which he was quite honest about the team's performance. And you kind of sit back and you reflect and you start asking yourself, why is it that West Ham United put in such a tepid performance against one of the worst teams, or the worst team in Premier League football, in Premier League history, when only a week before we could put in such a fantastic performance against a team like Liverpool away from home. It baffles you, doesn't it? Look, if you're new to this channel, if it's the first time that you're watching the West Ham Voice, please do consider becoming a subscriber. Costs nothing to subscribe, and all the content is free. And whether you're new, existing, just passing through, and if you enjoy the content, please at the end, please do hit the like button, because that helps to elevate the channel on YouTube's algorithms and all that sort of stuff. So let's start first of all by the interview. What Fullkrug said, and the interview went a bit like this. He talked about motivation. The motivation to want the game more. Sorry, it was shit, and I'm very angry. It's not the first time that we scored a goal, and the next goal kick, we just shoot the ball long. We don't try to play football anymore. We don't push up anymore. We just sink. And he went on to say, that's not the way we want to play. We can play 65 minutes before with possession, but then we score. And after that, half of the team try to score again, and the other half are just trying to defend very deep. That's not the way it works. We have to find a way to have togetherness, to have the idea of where we want to go and what we want to do. And this is the interesting bit. He said, the coach is very clear about what he wants, but we have to do it all. Everyone has to do it all. So Niclas Fullkrug's post-match Sky interview gave us probably more insight into West Ham's current mental state than anything that Graham Potter, or to be honest, Jared Bowen, could say about West Ham's current predicament. Fullkrug criticised our lack of ability to press forward after we scored our early second half goal against Southampton on Saturday. He said that our performance was shit. And let's be honest, he was absolutely right, 100% correct. For a player to be so clear as to how we performed was in a way refreshing to fans, but at the same time, quite concerning. He said that this was a mental state. When he was asked by the interviewer, was it a mental state or a physical thing? He alluded to this is a mental state of mind. But where has this lack of not wanting to press forward come from? Maybe we need to go back in time a little bit and remember what it was like under David Moyes at times. Most fans argued that David Moyes' way was to absorb pressure, try and hit teams on the break, and if we went ahead, sit back and try to defend sometimes a narrow lead. Of course, this rarely works, or certainly rarely worked, because we'd always invariably concede a late goal and either end up drawing a game or sometimes end up losing a game because of that approach. Now, what was interesting on Saturday was Graham Potter's Moyesque decisions in the way he used his subs. In the final few minutes against Southampton, it felt like a throwback to how David Moyes managed games. So does that mean that Potter is very much like David Moyes, or does that sort of indicate something else about the mentality or the mental state of the squad itself? Now, first of all, the fact that Potter pulled off all our attacking players and went with a back five for the final few minutes of the game kind of admitted he was conceding that we were under the cosh, and it was an invitation for Southampton to just keep pressing ahead, which they duly did, and they got their reward with an impressive goal. Now, it was awful for West Ham, but Southampton fully deserved to get back into the game. And to be honest, if they had taken all 3 points, I don't think anyone would have turned around and said they wouldn't have deserved it, because they absolutely did. And when Fullkrug expressed his anger, was it targeted at Potter, or was it targeted at the players on the pitch? When I first heard his post-match comments, my immediate thoughts were that he was definitely targeting them against his teammates. You got to listen to it again and what he said. And you would think that too. He said quite clearly that the players were not following Graham Potter's game plan. In fact, looking at Potter from the stands, you could see that he was actually urging the team to go forward. But all we did was drop deeper and deeper. And we kind of knew what was coming. We've seen it before. We've seen it so many times before. So is this a hangover from the Moyes era? Or was it that Potter simply had no choice but to throw more defenders on because we were just relinquishing so much possession that he felt, well, we'd better get defenders on in order to defend the goal? 8 of the players that started the game against Southampton were David Moyes players, with the other 3 having been brought in by Lopetegui and Steiden. So perhaps, in some way, you could argue that this is an automatic fallback. You know, the team, 7 or 8 of those players that played for Moyes, it's almost like it's instilled in them. We've got a goal. Let's drop deep. Let's make sure that we defend that lead, because that's what we've been trained to do. But we've had 2 managers since then, and surely that kind of approach, that kind of mindset must have been coached out of the team by now. No? Well, I don't know. Under Lopetegui, everything was chaotic. On a tactical level, the players didn't know what Lopetegui wanted from one game to the next. So perhaps they ended up having to do what they thought was right. And doing what they thought was right was trying to defend the lead. Mind you, let's be really honest, we didn't defend many leads when under Lopetegui. We just kept conceding goal after goal after goal. But then Potter came along, and the first few games under his tenure, everything looked a little bit different. It looked like he was going to be a little bit gung-ho. We seemed to be a bit faster, more dynamic, a little bit more direct. But since those first few games, we've been poor, and we have reverted to type. And maybe again, this is where the mentality thing comes in. And maybe again, because we're nervous about conceding, we're getting a little bit too defensive, a bit Moyesque. We haven't won a game since the end of February, and that was a very unconvincing win against Leicester. The only convincing performances since Potter's arrival have only really resulted in 1 win. We played really well against Aston Villa twice. The games against Chelsea away, Arsenal away, and Liverpool away, all good performances, all away performances, but just the 1 win. Many fans are suggesting that Potter is actually as defensive-minded as Moyes is, so this is probably why he's doing what he's doing. But I'm torn. I'm really torn. Look, Potter absolutely got his game plan wrong against Southampton. There's no denying that. There's no defending that. I'm not trying to defend it in any way. He got it wrong. He took off his attacking players. He played with a back 5 to hold on to the lead, and it backfired on him big time. Fullkrug, making the comments that he makes, has come from a different background, hasn't he? He's come from a team that was competing to win the Bundesliga, as well as being in last season's Champions League final. You can see he's got that winning mentality. He's got he's come from a team with a completely different approach to football. He, like many other players who recently signed to the club, have come here to be challenging for Europe again, not playing the football that we're playing. Fullkrug has got that winning mentality. His anger is recognised, because I doubt very much that he or any other player that's recently coming would think for a moment that we would end up being the 4th worst team in the Premier League. And we're poor. We're really, really poor. So whilst I actually do think that Fullkrug's comments are directed at the players, Potter exacerbated the situation at the weekend by adopting those defensive-minded Moyes-like tactics. So, is Graham Potter the right man for the job? Well, when Potter was first mooted as a potential replacement for Lopetegui, I remember arguing that I didn't think he would be the right person. I didn't think he would improve us. I looked at his record for Brighton, where the highest league position was ninth, and the subsequent managers in De Zerbi and Hertzler seemed to have achieved more than Potter ever did at the club. I also argued that he had a backing of a well-oiled system at Brighton, where the owner, Tony Bloom, heavily invested in a data-driven analytics system to identify fantastic footballing talent from around the globe. And all that Potter had to do was just coach the players. So given that West Ham don't have that kind of, or didn't have that kind of infrastructure in place, I didn't really think that Potter was going to be a success at the club. But then a number of things happened which helped me to change my mind on Potter. The first was the dynamic start I mentioned. In the first 7 games at West Ham, 4 of those games gave fans real hope for the future. I've mentioned the 2 against Villa, one of them being in the FA Cup, and the away games against Chelsea, where we felt robbed of at least a point, and of course the away win against Arsenal, and more recently the performance, the second half performance against champions-elect Liverpool. At that time, Potter also demonstrated that he wasn't afraid to shake things up a little bit by dropping players he felt were not delivering, which, for us fans, was quite refreshing. He also showed faith in youth by selecting Ollie Scholes, and not just the odd cameo role, but a proper berth in the starting lineup. And on top of all of that, behind the scenes, he managed to convince the board to pay £1 million in compensation to get his right-hand man to the club from Chelsea, Carl McCauley, who, along with a data-driven system at Brighton, is reputed to have been part of identifying the talent that they brought to Brighton. And then on top of that, he also retained the data guru, Max Hahn, who was brought in by Tim Steidten. So with all of those things, I persuaded myself that perhaps Potter can be the future of West Ham and that things will start to improve. And I kind of accepted it may not happen this season, but I was kind of hoping that maybe better times will come next season. But then, of course, things started to turn sour. We had an okay second half against Everton, a fantastic second half against Liverpool that I've already mentioned. But the rest of the performances under Potter, unfortunately, they've been really woeful. And the performance against Southampton was just the pinnacle of how things can unravel really, really fast in football. So where do we stand from here? I'm honest when I say I really don't know. I'm reluctant to jump on the new bandwagon, the Potter out, because I, for one, don't think the board are going to be sacking another manager anytime soon. I think Potter will indeed be given a chance to reshape the squad. And I've heard his comments about not needing a full-scale squad rebuild. But I think he's just saying that because I think the last thing the players want to do or want to hear is that there's going to be a wholesale changes, because that will it would just make them give up even more than what they've already done. So I think there is going to be a major overhaul in the summer, undoubtedly, rather than the tweak or two that he kind of alluded to. So as awful that majority, so the majority of performances under his tenure have been really, really bad. And as galling as it was to see him try to defend a narrow lead against the worst team in the Premier League, I'm prepared to give Potter the summer transfer window and also to give him about a dozen games in the 25-26 season. And then I'll pass judgment on how I think he's doing. But as it stands right now, there's no denying it's pretty grim. The summer transfer window is not just vital for Graham Potter and his reputation to get it right. Potter, you can almost argue, is currently on a life support machine at West Ham. but it's also inevitably important for West Ham itself. Because to be honest, if we get this transfer window wrong, this summer transfer window wrong, I don't think we'd be looking at targeting Europe next season. I think we might be targeting to stay in the Premier League. And that in itself will speak volumes.